Hello and welcome. I'm Yamini Kalra from Information Security Media Group, and I'm thrilled to be your host for today's webinar. The title is Securing the Future, DevSecOps in Action. Our expert panel, comprising Yashasvi Mudumbai, Senior Director of Solution Engineering at JFrog, and Divakar Kasibhatla, Director for Application Security at AT&T, will dive into some of the pressing challenges organizations face in securing their software supply chains and how DevSecOps practices can help transform these challenges into opportunities. Quick word about ISMG. We are a global cybersecurity intelligence and education platform headquartered in Princeton, New Jersey. You may recognize us from one of our many, 37 to be exact, global media sites. This includes Bankinfo Security, CIO.inc, and AItoday.io. All right. A few notes of housekeeping before we dive in. If you have questions during today's webinar, feel free to submit them using the chat window. We'll address them during the Q&A session towards the end. Should you experience any technical issues, please write to us at webinars@ismg.io. A reminder that the discussion today involves copyrighted material, so if you or your organization plans to use some of it, please contact us at the email address on your screen. Now here's something about our sponsor, JFrog. Driven by a liquid software vision, the JFrog software supply chain platform is a single system of record that powers organizations to build, manage, and distribute software quickly and securely, ensuring it is available, traceable, and tamper-proof. The integrated security features also help identify, protect, and remediate against threats and vulnerabilities. JFrog's hybrid, universal, and multi-cloud platform is available as both self-hosted and SaaS services across major cloud service providers. I'm privileged today to welcome our speakers, Yashasvi Mudumbai, Senior Director of Solution Engineering at JFrog. Yashasvi is a cybersecurity leader and DevSecOps advocate dedicated to empowering organizations with robust solutions for secure and efficient software delivery. With a passion for cloud security, threat detection, and integrating security into the software development lifecycle, Yashasvi plays a pivotal role in driving JFrog's mission to revolutionize software security and resilience across the APAC region. He's joined by Divakar Kasibhatla, Director for Application Security at AT&T. Divakar is a seasoned DevSecOps leader with extensive experience in application security strategies and operations. He drives strategic initiatives to embed security into every phase of the software development lifecycle and has contributed to multiple enterprise-scale transformations. He has an extensive experience in integrating security practices into SDLC and CI/CD pipelines and driving compliance with frameworks that suit the needs of the organization. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, Yamini.
Hi, Yamini. Thank you.
Now, before we get started, let me just briefly outline what our audience can expect in the next 1 hour. We'll start with a fireside chat with our expert panelists and then move on to a Q&A session. So feel free to submit your questions in the chat window as we go along. We'll then conclude the webinar with a live demonstration from JFrog. We also have JFrog Solutions Engineer online with us throughout the webinar to answer any technical questions you may have, so type away. And now, the stars of our show, Yashasvi, Divakar, again, thank you so much for being here today.
Pleasure.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, without much further ado, let's dive in. Before we dive in, let's just take a look back at 2024. We have seen some significant trends this year in software supply chain attacks, including the integration of AI-generated code into pipelines. Yashasvi, let's start with you. How have these developments reshaped the way organizations approach security?
Yes. So talking about 2024, it indeed has been a pivotal year for software supply chain security. The AI generated code raise has not just been seen this year, it's actually been starting from last year itself. But as it brings up opportunities, it also brings up certain challenges as well. AI can speed up a development by automating repetitive tasks, right? But it also introduces risk like insecure code patterns or the unintentional inclusion of vulnerable dependencies as well. Right. And this has led organizations to rethink their security strategies in few ways. broadly into proactive and continuous security. So not just from a production live environment, but also from a shift left perspective as well. So it's no longer enough to test for vulnerabilities after the deployment, right? So we are seeing widespread adoption of real-time scanning and artifact analysis as well, right? So for example, and making sure that dependencies and binaries and containers are continuously monitored and flagged for risk before they even enter the production. Secondly, the securing CI/CD pipeline, right? AI integration into pipeline has made these environments high-value targets for attackers, protecting build environments. And these are crown jewels, literally, right? Safeguarding code repositories, ensuring immutability of build artifacts are now standard practices. And advanced tools can actually automate a lot of these things as well. And developer enablement is something which has been practiced for a long time, but it has matured a long way as well. Developers play a very critical role. I call them the artisans. They are the one who actually build a lot of things. And with that, maintaining security is the need of the hour as well, which a lot of companies have started to embrace it. But starting from an IDE phase is actually very important. Spotting vulnerabilities right from that, start of the development is actually important. And when we have AI suggested code, identifying these vulnerabilities at the start reduces, the total, cost as well. And, finally, fostering trust in software supply chain. The most important of that to maintain an entire ecosystem is to also understand the SBOMs and binary level analysis to maintain compliance with ever evolving, regulations.
Interesting take. Divakar, I'd love your perspective on this as well. What trends do you think have had the biggest impact on security strategies, especially in the APAC region?
Good afternoon, everybody. And let me just start with a disclaimer that all the opinions and responses that I'm putting out here are absolutely my personal opinions and gained out of decades of experience from my industry that I worked with various organizations and domains, not attributable to my current employer or any of my former employers. Now, generative AI is a interesting development. Adoption of generative AI obviously have led to a lot of speed enhancement within the development teams. The learning that is done by the development AI code generators is basically on the public repos. So it's quite possible that the code that is generated out of this out of these tools could be vulnerable. So it's very important that we treat them as code that is the same sense of scrutiny that we showed for how a developer generated it. The same sense, perhaps with an increased scrutiny, is definitely important. Some of the threats like backdoors, malicious code inclusions, dead code, deprecated vulnerabilities, deprecated functions, deprecated components being used. So a lot of emphasis that needs to be shown. Securing the pipeline itself also becomes that much more difficult or that much more important as you have automated code generators being used within the development phases. We have seen in the past some of the build servers being compromised in a few attacks, and that warrants that our pipeline itself need to be secure. So keeping these vulnerabilities in view and showing the same sense of scrutiny as developed by a developer, or for that matter even more, is very important for every piece of code, or even the AI generated code.
Wonderful. Now, Divakar, banking on your experience, what foundational steps or strategies would you recommend to organizations that are just beginning their DevSecOps journey? Are there any missteps maybe they should be mindful of?
So any organization that's starting on their DevSecOps journey, for that matter, secure SDLC journey, where they're starting on practices, I would recommend a 5-step process. One, look at your current state. What is your threat landscape? What controls are apt for you? Define your SDLC. Define your secure practices that you need to incorporate into each of those. Customize the controls in a way that it suits your organizational needs. Start small, scale up fast, and continuously measure how much risk you are reducing by complying to each of those controls, so that you are continuously measuring the risk debt that you have in terms of how much control emphasis you want to place, so that your risk is within the risk appetite of what your organization would demand. Continuously invest in people, process, and technology on the security aspect, while keeping in control the risk appetite and also the amount of emphasis you want to give, in a way that you are putting emphasis on automated controls, so that the speed and security both are in a balance, and the quantum of work that you want the developers to do for security should be more on the security aspect than on the workflow and the process itself. So to have those automated controls in place will be very pivotal for any DevSecOps adoption. And some of the resiliency that you'll find in terms of DevSecOps operations is due to those automated controls. So adopting right process, people, and technology when it comes to DevSecOps operations is very, very pivotal.
Now, another pain point a lot of organizations are faced with is that security is often seen as a trade-off against development speed. How can organizations drive DevSecOps in helping balance speed to market and security, all the while keeping up with regulatory requirements? Yashasvi, let's start with you, and then Divakar, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Absolutely. Mr. Diwakar will have, more insights, talking about, this DevSecOps mindset and introducing security into the DevOps process, starting from the waterfall method, right? Security has always been like an orphan child from the start, right? And now it's no longer, there. So it's just a misconception that security slows down the process. The security and speed are mutually exclusive, right? Think about a scenario where, I finish all of my development in Godspeed time and I try to release it. And I find, not just bugs, I find, my API keys, I see security flaws, vulnerabilities. There's an exploit that can be, created out of it. And the time taken to release that software into production is actually going to, it's just going to increase, right? And for that, in every phase of your software development lifecycle, security needs to be, implemented. From that, I would broadly, classify into 5 segments. So one is automating security, right? Talking about the CI/CD pipeline, when DevOps was, introduced, people always said that, should I really do that? Then when they saw the entire process was flawless, a lot of people started, inculcating that. And, it's no longer a question of, should I have, DevOps? Everyone has DevOps, right? So now integrating security scans in the CI/CD pipelines have also matured a lot. I wouldn't say getting introduced, it has actually matured a lot, right? Organizations are starting to detect vulnerabilities in real time, right? And no longer developers are actually communicating back to the management saying that if I do this, my work gets slowed down, because they also understand the benefits out of it. I don't, no developer, even if I am a developer, I don't want someone to come and ask me saying that, hey, Yash, or the code which you have developed has vulnerabilities. Fix it now. I would be working on some other project, and why should I start doing it now? So probably license violation for that matter, right? So what are the third party dependencies that I've used, and is it causing any license violation? License violation cannot be taken lightly. It's a very serious matter. And from that matter, the second broad aspect is like, as I mentioned earlier, shift left, right? Instead of shift left, I would say start left. From an ID perspective, if the developer can identify and fix the issues right from the code, even before it enters the pipeline, that saves a lot of time. That significantly reduces the cost as well, instead of fixing it in the later stages. And regulatory compliance, it could be homegrown, it could be they're following, organizations are following GDPR or whatever compliance it is, right? How do I comprehensively maintain that, right? Including and generating, managing SBOMs, ensure traceability and compliance without any extra manual effort. And of course, the cultural alignment as well. between the development and security and operations team? How do I make sure that this is all, fluid, and everyone is responsible for security? And every organization has a practice of including security, and everyone is responsible for that as well. And protecting the pipeline, finally, from a CI/CD pipeline itself, it's extremely crucial, right? This involves protecting your code repository, ensuring immutability of build artifacts, right? So if you are able to release a software, in an immutable way in every stage of your SDLC, and also, have a traceability of what is exactly happening where, and using advanced techniques, this is going to help in a larger aspect. I would put it that way.
Wonderful. Diwakar, you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, there are I think four things additionally that one needs to look at. One is how much protection for what asset. So risk-based adaptability of controls, right? So applicability of controls. How much control you want to place for what kind of an asset, so that you are not overkilling on what you want to achieve. So that's one. Second, automation of compliance and security. DevSecOps gives you that flexibility of being able to comply to what you want, and controls like block on build, break on merge, exactly puts you to that soft and hard gates where you can restrict. Yes, talked about shift left or start from left. I would go one step forward. Security by default. If you are an enterprise who talks about secure logging, for example, have a usable component or have design patterns which can be applied across and which are secure enough. So those are the kind of things that organizations can adapt from a DevSecOps standpoint. And then those can be implemented at scale. That would give a lot of impetus to the organizations to protect themselves. From a regulatory standpoint, I just have one more point to add there. So regulations, obviously, they keep changing. So that volatility can also be quickly adapted by the organizations by incorporating those into controls and then implement those as policies within DevSecOps. So you have a change of just taking an example there. You have a change of a severity of a particular vulnerability. If you have to implement it manually across the organization, it takes forever. All you need to do in a DevSecOps is go change it in a particular tool, and it gets incorporated into all the life cycle, right? So those are the kind of changes you want to see as automated control.
Well explained. Now, let's talk about tools. We have SAST and DAST. We know they're valuable for securing the software pipeline, but are they enough on their own? Yashasvi, maybe you could share some examples or use cases of how organizations can go beyond these tools to secure their pipelines.
Absolutely. So this is one of my most favorite topic as well, because when we talk about security, when we talk about, say, DevSecOps, when we talk about AppSec, this SAST and DAS plays a pivotal role as well, right? They're fantastic tools for identifying vulnerabilities in code and applications, but they primarily address specific points in software development lifecycle. To truly secure the pipeline, every organization need to adapt more comprehensive end-to-end approach, right? So the examples are like artifact security in CI/CD pipeline, right? So while SAST and DAS focus on code and runtime behavior, they don't address security of build artifacts and dependencies. These are extremely important, right? So when you talk about your code and dependencies, 85-90% of your code is actually third party, right? So at that point in time, how do you identify these issues at an early stage, and how you can actually implement a binary-centric approach, ensuring all artifacts in the pipeline are vetted for vulnerabilities, license compliance, integrity, and so on and so forth, right? Second thing comes the secret management. Yes, the SAST does identify secrets as well. But accidental exposure of secrets like API keys or certificates is a common risk that SAST and DAS cannot fully mitigate, right? Implementing security detection tool integrated in the CI/CD pipeline ensures that all this sensitive information is never published to public repositories. How can I go ahead and trace my local repo and remote repo and make sure that these secrets are never exposed, right? And that that cripples the entire organization itself, right? Proactive threat intel. How do I make sure that I have a well-known threat intel well ahead of time so that I can block malicious dependencies even before it enters the environment? Do I have a way or a catalog saying that I can choose these specific packages, or I can write guardrails even before the packages actually enter my environment? And of course, runtime observability and feedback. Once you are in the process, finally integrating runtime security feedback in the pipeline allows teams to learn from production issues and strengthen your pre-production security practices. This is exactly how I would broadly look at this. And of course, there's a lot more to dwell deeper into this.
Yeah, but you explained it very well. Now, Yashasvi, again, back to you. If a supplier, maybe it's a third-party software provider, it's an open source library maintainer, but if they pass initial security checks, and I'm an organization, I'm suffice, I'm okay with them. So does it mean they'll remain secure indefinitely?
A great question, right? I would give you a quick analogy for that, right? So it's like doing a blood test, when you are, when you're born, and not doing any type of medical checks after that, right? So the short answer is no. Passing an initial security check is just the beginning of an ongoing process, right? Because the threat landscape is ever evolving, right? It's not static. What is seen as secure package now today may become vulnerable tomorrow, right? Due to the emerging threats and zero-day vulns and all of that. Changes in supply chain, right? And as I mentioned, not 100% of your code is your own code, right? 85-90% of that is actually third party. What are the architectural changes that are actually happening? What are the new vulnerabilities that you're actually bringing in? Are you aware of that? And talking about the first discussion point, the AI introduced code, right? So how do I make sure that there are no security risks that actually come with that, right? Of course, it makes our lives easier, but how do I make sure that it is actually secure? And of course, maintainer practices as well. Open source library maintainers or third-party vendors may not always maintain a same level of vigilance. For example, one's active maintainer might stop updating the project, leaving it vulnerable, right? So, example, I would want to have these 3 or 4 different packages. Example, there could be hundreds of third-party dependencies in my code, but these packages have never been updated in the last 365 days. Can I go ahead and introduce them? I don't know what are the new vulnerabilities that are actually coming in, and of course, the dependency risks as well. If one of the dependencies become compromised, it means that the entire chain is compromised. So I would, think of these things, and of course, mitigating these risks from continuous monitoring, automated remediating pipeline, and supply transparency in SBOM. What contributes to this software? What are the other, software bill of materials? How do I ensure traceability? How do I flag those vulnerabilities? And of course, periodic revalidation in near real time, right? So how do I make sure that I vet all of this in near real time? How do I index my, repos and make sure that I don't have any vulnerabilities? Or if supplies evolve, how do I make sure that the security posture doesn't change? So this is how I would look at it.
Wonderful. So we know by now that maintaining supply chain security requires more than just initial checks, right? Now, based on your experience, Divakar, how can organizations leverage DevSecOps practices to establish a feedback loop that identifies and mitigates risks in real time across the software delivery lifecycle?
So let me segment my answer into 2 pieces. One, what's the structures you got to be creating? You need to have governance, oversight, and enablement. So governance, where you have your understanding of what controls and policies you got to have in place. Oversight, where you are ensuring that the compliance and the enforcement of all the controls and policies is done effectively. Third is the enablement piece, where you have put enough control solutions in place, and effectively so, in a way that you are able to meet the controls effectively so that your risk is in control. And by doing that, you are actually ensuring that whether it's a real time, a preventive, or a detective control, you make sure that the risk appetite is maintained. Now, when it comes to the other piece, which is about near and real time monitoring, you got to have monitoring solutions in place. For example, let's talk about API security. If you're talking about API security, it's just not enough to be doing penetration testing on APIs. You also got to have API security monitoring tools in place, which would give you a near or real time alerting on what is the kind of attacks that you're seeing as a company. Now, what that has helped is your intelligence. If there's an alerting in place, great. If not, at least you will be able to detect it within time to be able to respond to such attacks. So that's on the monitoring tools itself. The others is you should have a way of analyzing your data that is generated out of all your control solutions in a way that you detect patterns. So you're going to have data analysis and detect patterns related understanding of all the data that's generated within your security solutions in a way that you're identifying uh, what's the kind of attacks that you're seeing for your particular company, right? So that's near time data. So when you're talking about monitoring solutions, which is more real time, then you're talking about pattern detections of all the data that is produced out of your solution. So that's near time. And you definitely also have to be prepared for the condition. So uh, security is as good as it is there, but in eventuality of you having an attack, you got to be prepared for how you would respond. So you should have been prepared from the beginning. If an incident were to happen, what your response mechanisms are. So that resiliency to be there in place is also very vital.
Okay. Yashasvi, would you like to add to it?
Yeah. So, talking about, all of these points, it's actually becomes extremely interesting. If you actually notice all of the explanations, everyone is actually aligned of saying that how does the software supply chain as a whole gets secured? And if you talk about all of the examples over here, it actually starts, from the left. How do you secure your CI/CD? How do you make sure that the entire SDLC process is maintained, and how do you ensure that security is actually implemented? I think that clearly comes out of all of this discussion.
Wonderful. Well, this has been very insightful. Gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights. Now, that wraps up our fireside chat, but we will now move on to our Q&A session. So if you have any questions, this is the time to type them into the chat box and we'll get to as many as we can. Let's start. Yashasvi, we got a question for you. Now, build systems, including CI/CD environments and dependency management tools, are frequent targets for attackers. Our attendee wants to know that given your expertise, what steps do you recommend to organizations to safeguard these systems from compromise?
Yeah. So, safeguarding this CI/CD is actually interesting, right? So, when you talk about safeguarding CI/CD systems and dependency management tools, right, it requires a multi-layered approach, right? So, if I look from broader perspective, these are 5 different pillars, right? How do I harden my CI/CD environment? The most important thing is, follow a zero trust policy, right? So, restrict access to pipeline using least privilege principles and enforce MFA, right? Isolate your CI/CD environments to minimize the exposures and restrict access to sensitive build secrets like your API keys and certificates. Make sure no one, involves them or introduces, these keys during that build. Securing dependencies, of course. Try to use curated, vetted libraries and monitor dependencies in real time, for vulnerabilities. Generate and maintain SBOM, of course, to ensure full traceability for all of your artifacts. Automate your threat detection. Don't go for a reactive approach. Try to automate your threat detection. Continuously scan binaries, containers, build artifacts for vulnerability, compliance issues, and malicious code. There are multiple tools that are available. tools like artifact repositories and dynamic scanning solutions, and it should go hand in hand. It shouldn't be like a separate process altogether. And of course, immutable build artifacts in your SDLC lifecycle, adopt immutable builds, and digitally sign artifacts to ensure their integrity. We all talk about release lifecycle management. How do I make sure that I have immutable builds in every part of my RLM, right? And monitoring audit trails as well. Of course, this is also a key where you maintain an audit trail, implement audit trail to track the pipeline changes, build provenance, right? So this is a well-known topic. And of course, if there are any anomalies, try to report it as on time. Real-time monitoring tool can actually detect and respond to threats that target your CI/CD systems.
Now, we've discussed external threats to supply chains and how we can secure them. Our attendee wants to know about internal risks. How can organizations address both internal and external threats holistically? Devakar, let's start with you.
Trust but verify. That's the principle I would go by. You trust something, then you got to verify it. So it's a fine balance on how much control you want to place. It's like a sprinter, right? I mean, it's a marathon. You should know when to run, when to walk. So otherwise, you'll not reach the finish goal. It's something like that. You got to trust, but verify. It's imperative to have controls that continuously monitor, identify, track, detect, and then mitigate all those findings. And it is very imperative to also have resiliency plans in place, both from availability, confidentiality, integrity, and availability standpoint, without which it becomes very difficult when something were to actually happen. So threefold approach: trust but verify. Second, have your resiliency plans in place. Third, have as many controls automated in place which can give you near and real-time information. Continuous monitoring and alerting is very, very important.
Yep. So, internal threats are just as critical as external ones as well. You cannot oversee them, right? And just to add on to Mr. Divakar's, points, again, the zero trust architecture and the access control implement very strict access control with role-based, permission RBAC, right? And then for zero trust principle across your system, who requires what access, who's accessing what, make sure that you implement a proper RBAC. Of course, developer training and awareness is a key as well. Equip all of your internal teams with knowledge about secure code practices, dependency risk, and emerging threats as well. Right? Security awareness program, of course, helps a lot of things and reduces unintentional insider risk. There are a lot of risk where when you talk about insider risk, unknowingly they go ahead and publish all of this. So making sure that you have a program to create awareness is also a key. Supply chain monitoring, right? Continuously monitoring both external and internal risk using tools like real-time artifact scanning, dependency check, runtime security to flag anomalies is also a key. And talking about developer training and awareness, it also talks about secret management and secure configuration as well, right? So it also reminds me that how a simple API key that was exposed during the build process got down an entire organization itself. Unintentional exposure. The developer forgot. It was unintentional, but it created a lot of chaos as well. And exposing sensitive credential or misconfigured environments, that hurts organizations in a greater level. And incident response preparedness. It's not about will I get hit, if I get hit, or it's just about when will I get hit, right? So if that's the case, establishing a strong incident response plan to address all of the insider risks alongside external attacks as well. This is also part of your RLM itself, release lifecycle management, right? So if I start to understand these vulnerabilities and these risks in my entire process, in each and every stage, I should just be able to click a button and then roll it back to my previous version, where I know that this version is much more secure for release. All this happens before it goes to production, and how I can ship my immutable releases and make sure that no one tampers it when it goes to the production stage. I think these are how I would put it.
Helpful. Now, Divakar, in your experience, you've likely encountered or addressed challenges like ensuring end-to-end visibility across the software supply chain and preventing the misuse of exposed secrets. We have a question for you just on that. What leadership strategies did you implement in 2024 to tackle these issues, and how did DevSecOps practices play a role in addressing them effectively?
So, one is every organization needs to have information classification model. You need to know what data you have, what's the kind of information you carry, classify and apply controls accordingly. That's one. Second, you got to identify secrets from the origin. So if you have a code repository, you scan the secret. You don't want to check in secrets into your repositories. That's as simple as that. But inadvertently, if there are secrets that are in your repo, you want to scan them, identify, and then protect them. But that's only with the code repositories. What about in the databases? So you have data that is at rest and transit. So you got to be protecting those, which comes through your secure coding practices. And then you have to run your SAST, your DAST. You should also be looking at how you are protecting your keys. What's the kind of access controls that you are placing in place? What's the data that's going out? So once it goes out of your perimeter, you have no control on that. How do you ensure that the delivery of that data itself is protected and only the right people are getting it? So your authorization mechanisms got to be strong. So it boils down to having a clear-cut understanding of what your data is, what your information is, and how where all is it going, where is it originating, where all is it going, and then what controls are in place, and then what is the enforcement level of those controls, and how effectively are those controls being put in place, and things like encryption, masking, tokenization, hashing. There are a lot of controls that you need to have in place from both secure coding standpoint and also from identification and remediation standpoint. It's secret is one term, but it is a secret.
Wonderful. Yashasvi, we got a question for you now. What is the best practice to implement DAST? Is it in pipeline or managing separately? And can you suggest some best DAST tools available in market?
So I wouldn't go ahead and introduce a new vendor for DAST. There are so many other tools that are actually available for DAST, right? So, but the larger, broader question is, will I be able to achieve my DevSecOps goal, or will I be able to secure my software supply chain if I just introduce DAST? Right. So DAST is one part of the puzzle when you look at securing your entire software supply chain, right? And is this part of my software development which actually requires only DAST tools, right? If that is the case, what type of test I would like to do? So is it just based on top 10 OWASP controls? I just want to look at my code for any type of security vulnerability. What is that I'm trying to achieve? So based on that, I would actually choose a tool, right? So if you ask me from a CISO perspective, right, I would rather look from a software supply chain perspective in each and every part of the puzzle. How do I start securing my entire, AppSec, right? I would go from an AppSec perspective, and I would actually look from a holistic, perspective as well, right? So I would also like to ask Mr. Diwakar, saying that Mr. Diwakar, apart from as an individual, right? From application security and from a DevSecOps perspective, right? So would you be looking at securing your entire software supply chain, or will you be looking at pointed solutions which actually solve a separate problem statement? What is that you would be looking at, Mr. Devakar?
Interesting, right? So there are again two principles of thought there. Horses for courses. That's one way of looking at it. You look at what's the best suited control solution for mapping a particular control. Do all the POCs, get to a vendor, and then finalize on a particular tool. That's one way of looking at it. You also have an approach where you can bank on one solution to be able to provide your entire supply chain management, and then do it. So again, it's two schools of thought. There is no right or a wrong methodology there. What suits the organization is what one needs to look at. It can boil down to the quantum of investment that you can make as well. So there are a lot of points that you need to consider while you decide on what control solution you go to. So it for me, control effectiveness is the most critical portion. As long as my control effectiveness is maintained and the risk is kept in control, whether it's one vendor or a chain of tools that we are bringing to the supply chain should not matter.
Okay, well, I hope that answers the question. We have another one. We have quite a few actually. Let's start with this one. With higher resilience or reliance on data in enterprises these days and data gathering from multiple sources, how can organizations ensure their data pipelines are secure and the data entering the system is not harmful? Divakar, would you like to take it first?
Well, the data that's coming in, so you got to have methodologies to sanitize data. That's one thing. So the principle of trust but verify is not just applicable to processes; it's also applicable to your applications. So anything that's coming into your system, whether it's in whether it's in bytes, streams, or a string, anything that comes in, you got to be obviously validating it. You should have secure coding guidelines implemented already in place, so that data that is baked in or brought in is processed well and processed within how it is planned for within the application, and then taken from there. So it depends on, again, the kind of data, the kind of application, whether it's a thick client, mobile, how you are storing the data, what's the kind of data that you are processing. So it depends on factors, but yeah, essentially you got to be sanitizing the data that's coming in and then processing accordingly.
Sounds good. Yashasvi, a question for you. Does JFrog provide online DevSecOps testing?
Okay, that's an interesting question. So when you talk about online DevSecOps testing, I would like to understand more on what is that requirement for that. So if you ask me, saying that is JFrog providing DevSecOps, or are you participating in the entire DevSecOps journey? Yes, the answer is of course yes. Starting from the ID itself, I can identify threats even before the build actually happens. Right, and of course, from a SCA perspective, I can detect all of the vulnerabilities that are actually already within your build itself, and from there I can identify all of your secrets and help you build an SBOM, and not just that, also help you to identify the impact analysis of every single vulnerability that is actually there. And I'm always a fan of identifying vulnerabilities which are extremely relevant to me, which impacts me, rather than going and fixing, just based on CVS's core value itself. So I would take it in that manner. And from a DevSecOps testing, I think I know what you're asking. Probably we'll discuss it separately.
All right. Now we're running short of time, but let's take one more question before we wrap this up. I think both of you can answer this. What are the best practices or standard approaches for integrating IoT security into CI/CD pipelines, given the unique challenges of this relatively new domain compared to traditional web and mobile application security? Yes, let's begin with you.
Oh, yeah. So IoT, is a very interesting, way of looking at, securing your IoT, right? Let's take an example, right? So we all know connected cars. It's not new, right? in this era, let's not go till the US cars. Let's talk about our Indian manufacturers, right? So let's talk about our own well-known manufacturers. They do send over their updates. How do I make sure that these updates are actually secure, and how do I make sure that there are no tampering that happens when I go ahead and deliver this software updates over the air, right? So that becomes a key. And think about a fully automated car. I'm not talking about automatic transmission, a fully automated car. When I just send an over the air update, and the car stops in the middle of the traffic. Do you want that? No, right? So it's a nightmare. How do I make sure that I have a secure way of understanding and promoting all of these? It's again a part of your SDLC, right? It's not something new. It's a part of your DevOps and DevSecOps practice, and goes through a pipeline. How do I make sure that I don't introduce vulnerabilities, and these vulnerabilities creates an exposure, and some other hacker goes and tries to exploit that vulnerability, and puts in crazy amount of things that is not supposed to be there, right? So I've seen live examples of live hacks. And when you talk about IoT security, it's not very, very different. It's very similar. Securing from the start, and making sure that when the build is at the final stage in each part of your SDLC, how do I make sure that I create an immutable build, and each and every part of my cycle, how do I make sure that I introduce security, and I also have a traceability of saying that who has added what in every part of my life cycle, right? And then making sure that the final package is ready to be shipped where it needs to be shipped. That's how I would look at it.
Wonderful. Yes, Diwakar, what's your take?
Just a couple of points to add to what Yash talked about. One is hardening. You got to be extremely careful when it comes to IoT devices as to what the hardening is. Second, very long, an ancient problem all of us deal with is default passwords. So very simple things are the toughest things to do, and it is one of those ancient problems which I see even now a lot of organizations face a problem with, and some of those things are I mean, those are the things you got to be very, very careful about when it comes to IoT devices. You have all your security lifecycle going in great, but you miss out on fundamentals. So I go with Yash when he said it's not going to be different when it comes to SDLC with IoT, but you got to be careful with your deployment practices about making sure that the hardening is in place, and the testing is absolutely spot on in a way that you're not missing out on fundamentals. So that's I think a very critical component. It's not different from what a traditional application would demand you to do, but for IoT it becomes that much more critical, because once you leave it, it goes into a different component. You don't have control on what you're dealing with after it's delivered.
Well, I hope that answers the question. We have some more, but we cannot address all the questions at this point, but we will get back to you. So please write your questions at webinars@ismg.io, and someone from the JFrog team will get back to you with a response. Gentlemen, this has been very insightful. Thank you both. At this point, Diwakar needs to step away due to prior commitments. Diwakar, I again thank you so much for making the time. It's been a pleasure having you here.
Thank you, Yami. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you. With that, let's move on to the next part of our session, a live demonstration from JFrog. I know this is something you have all been waiting for. So Yashasvi, let's not wait anymore. The floor is yours.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. It's going to be a very quick gist of how I would look at security, right? So I'm going to share my screen over here. I'm not going to talk about how the data comes in. I'm not going to talk about how the Artifactory works and so on and so forth. I've just requested to share the screen. I think multiple presenters can share the screen. Okay, here it is. You should be seeing my screen now, and I'm going to turn to the right. So I'm just that there's another monitor on my right hand side. All right. So here, what I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you how and how should I start looking at vulnerabilities per se, right? This is a particular Docker image, right? And what is helpful for me, what is helpful for the organization is there are a lot of vulnerabilities that get introduced, right? So how do I start knowing which is important for me, right? So example, this is a Docker image. I can see that there are 225 vulnerabilities, out of which there are 44 critical and 98 high. Should I start fixing all of that, right? I would rather say that, look at what is applicable and what is not applicable. So if I look at not applicable, I would like to understand why it is actually not applicable. And if you see this, there is a log4j vulnerability, and log4j, we all know, a lot of people have spoken about it. It's a 9.8 vulnerability. It's a CVSS3 high. And I can see that the reason this is actually not, applicable for me is because it has never been called, right? So if I look at, the explanation over here, this issue can be exploited by attackers over the network, but this is not relevant to me as of now. I don't have to work on this because I have the JFrog team has enriched it, and they also say that the vulnerable class socket is never instantiated or used. If it is never used or never instantiated, I don't want to waste my time concentrating on this. I would rather look at something else, right? Going back. Right. So here I would also look at seeing that from the same, Docker image. I would also like to show you that from an impact analysis, perspective, how this vulnerability is impacting me, right? And looking at applicability over here, I'm just going to choose any one of the random vulnerabilities over here, right? And let's talk about another critical vulnerability, right? A PyAML, right? So this PyAML, what is the version of this? This 5.2, and the fixed version is 5.3.1, right? The developer will say that I don't want to upgrade this because this is going to break my build. Is there an alternate way in order to actually fix this? Yes. So what JFrog team does is the research team goes and research and says that, okay, fine, you don't have to upgrade it. You just have to follow these mitigations. And from a contextual analysis perspective, why is this CV? What should I actually start looking for it? And what are the alternate controls that I have? So which means that you bridge the gap between your operations team and the security team as well. And of course, the developer is going to be happy saying that, I don't want to upgrade this, because my entire build is going to take a hit. Rather, I would choose this one. And from an impact path perspective as well, is gives you a detailed list of saying that, detailed view of saying that where is this package really situated. So if it is like 10 layers inside, it's going to give you all the 10 layers saying that where it is exactly situated as well, right? Along with this, this also gives you, what are the secrets that are potentially exposed as well, plain text API keys that are found. Again, this is not just, from a first-party code perspective. This is actually through your build itself, what it actually means, where this is, and what can happen if I leave this, right? So this also gives you all of the context as well, so that you can you have visibility of what is inside, what should I start fixing it first, and so on and so forth. With this, you also have all of your SBOM as well, saying that what are my SBOMs that are there, what comprises for this entire Docker image, right? So, all of that is very well established. And we spoke about creating guardrails, right? So this is like after it comes to the build stage. How should I start looking at it even before the build? How can I start, protecting things before it enters my environment? So that's where this curation policy comes into play. Curation name is not something new. It's like, how do I curate my packages even before it enters my environment, right? So if I just go ahead and create a policy over here, I just wanted to show you a few things here, right? So if I look at policies here, there are a lot of policies, right? So I don't want to introduce malicious packages throughout my journey. or I don't want to introduce CVS score value above 9, or only if there is any fixed version available, then introduce it. So I don't want to include package licenses in GNU or LGPL, right? And I don't want to make sure that the packages which I'm introducing, they are too immature or too old, which can actually create security issues. Let's say these are things which you can create as a policy, and this will be implemented. What happens is when a developer is actually building it, the build itself will actually fail, and the developer will know what is currently happening. And not just that, from an ID perspective, we could use VS Code. You can use whatever it is. There is a JFrog, plugin that is available, right? And you can also run commands saying that JF audit. It will, it will automatically audit it and give you even before you actually build. So, which means that you will know, what is going to pass and what is actually going to fail as well, right? So that way, it helps you, maintain your environment, and in every part of your life cycle, you can actually start securing it as well. I'm going to pause here. I'm going to give it back to you, and probably Yamini, if you want, we can answer a question. Probably, we can end the session and give back some few minutes back to our viewers.
Sure. Let me just see if we have any questions coming in.
Yeah, I think there's one question which I would, which I see from, Manish. Since a single tool cannot comprehensively scan for all vulnerabilities, how is it viable to use multiple tools for performing SAST? A great question, right? So, when you talk about tool consolidation, when you talk about, SAST and all of that, again, going back to the same, discussion, SAST solves this particular part of the, puzzle, right? And not everything is going to be, solved by a SAST tool. Look at it from a holistic perspective, and making sure that you also understand from an artifact management perspective, and also scan your artifacts for any vulnerabilities that get introduced throughout the process. I would put it that way.
We have another question, Yashasvi. When scanning the same Docker image using two different paid vulnerability scanning tools, the results include varying lists of vulnerabilities. How can we determine which tool provides the most accurate and reliable output for identifying vulnerabilities?
Oh, it's a great question, and this is something which I come across, multiple times as well. Because if you look at every vendor, the base is NVD, right? So they all use, NVD as a base, and on top of that, you have multiple layers of saying that how this package is actually identified, so on and so forth, right? And that's one of the reasons why, from a detection perspective, different tools may give different output as well, right? So when I look from a holistic perspective, which tool to actually believe in, it's very hard to answer. There's no one single silver bullet. But what I would say is, if the tool is able to tell you where this package is exactly located, and also tell you whether this is actually relevant to you, and whether this probably a package has ever been used, and how this is actually applicable, I think that is exactly where you will have to look at it, and looking from that perspective will actually help you choose a better solution.
Right. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. And Yashasvi, before I forget, excellent demo. So I know we have a lot to learn from that. For our audience, if you have additional questions, feel free to email us at webinars@ismg.io, and someone from the JFrog team will get back to you. However, right now we cannot take any more questions. I want to thank our speakers again, Yashasvi and Devakar, for sharing their expertise in this very informative webinar. I also want to thank our attendees for making the time to attend and participate with us. I trust today's discussion has provided you with actionable insights to secure your software supply chains and drive innovation in the next year. We hope to see you again in one of our many upcoming events in the next year. For now, signing off for ISMG, I am Yamini Kalra. Have a great day.